Hello and welcome. You're watching UTV Live at 6.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. These are the headlines.
Devastated COVID families accuse some members of the executive of putting political interest first during the pandemic.
The decision making, I believe, still came down to the old green and orange.
The First Minister says lessons must be learned after the inquiry report exposed dysfunction at the heart of government.
This inquiry is about lessons to be learned, and I have to take all those things on board.
And united in mourning, the funerals take place of two of the young people killed in the Dundalk crash.
Also tonight, we're in Dublin getting ready for a seismic clash as Ireland bid to bash the box.
And we have a change in the way this weekend, not quite as cold as it has been this week, but we'll see the return of some wet and windy weather. I'll have all of the details later with the forecast.
The COVID pandemic left families devastated across Northern Ireland, with many unable to comfort their loved ones in their final days and numbers at funerals strictly limited. It came at a time when frontline workers risked their own lives to battle against the global health emergency.
The dysfunction at the heart of government here has been exposed by the COVID inquiry report. In a moment, we'll reflect on the political fallout, but first, our health correspondent Deborah McAleese has been speaking to some of the COVID families.
Left to live with the consequences of political failure. Both Brenda and Fiona lost their mothers to COVID during the pandemic. At a time when they expected Stormont's leaders to pull together, they say they were failed when it mattered the most.
There was no control. There was no control even within the hospitals at that time. The decision making, I believe, still came down to the old green and orange.
Absolutely.
Rather than doing away with that and putting people's lives first, they failed to put the people first, in my opinion.
It's actually upsetting because on one level we were led to believe there was a united front, and then it was only later on during the pandemic you could see the fractures. So when you see how fractured it was, it's actually and it's quite scary that during a crisis like the COVID-19 pandemic, which should have united them, didn't, and actually old political arguments raised their heads.
Brenda's mother, Ruth Burke, and Fiona's mother, Peggy Lusty, were among more than 5,000 people to die from COVID-related illnesses in Northern Ireland during the health emergency. Yesterday's damning report by Baroness Hallett found that at the time of the crisis, the Northern Ireland executive was fractured, key decisions were delayed and guidance was confused. And while arguments played at the top of government, people died, care homes battled outbreaks, and hospitals were overwhelmed.
We'll really want to know from government here in Northern Ireland very clearly what it is that they're going to do to learn lessons from the criticisms that have come forward from Baroness Hallett in the report, and what they're going to do to make sure that we have a much more effective and collective response to major public health emergencies like the pandemic going forwards.
For those who lost loved ones, the question now is whether lessons will finally be learned, or whether division will continue to shape how Northern Ireland responds to crisis. Do you think much has changed?
No, I really don't think much has changed. That's why I think everybody needs to review what they did. They can't just go, well, we did the best we can. Okay, maybe you think you did, but as far as we're concerned, from what we've heard, no, you didn't. And if that's the best that you can do, then actually, are you fit for purpose?
And some of those politicians who were criticised in Baroness Hallett's report are still in government. Do you have a message for any of the politicians today?
Yeah, do things different the next time. Work together.
Deborah joins us now. This report must be very damaging to public confidence.
Absolutely, Sarah. Look, for some of us, the pandemic, it's like a bad dream, something that happened in the past. But for many more, like Brenda and Fiona, it remains a living nightmare. Both are still grieving. Both are still feeling the trauma of how their mums died. Brenda's mum died alone. Fiona's mum, when she was dying, Fiona witnessed the chaos within the hospital. So there is a lot of anger, hearing about this terrible dysfunction in Stormont at a time when joined up leadership was really needed.
So there appears to be public concern also that little seems to have changed at Stormont since.
Well, you'll probably hear a bit more from Gareth and Vicky on that sort of political dysfunction, but it is clear that many people don't think that a lot has changed. Division seeped into the COVID response with a very human cost. And all of those who feel they were let down during the pandemic are very concerned about how Stormont might deal with any sort of future emergency.
OK, Deborah, there we'll leave it. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, the lasting human cost of the pandemic comes as the deep divisions and dysfunction in the executive during the pandemic were starkly laid out in a report from the former Judge Baroness Hallett. The First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, says lessons must be learnt. We'll hear from our political correspondent, Vicky Hawthorne, shortly. But first, this report from our correspondent, Gareth Wilkinson.
As coronavirus gripped Northern Ireland, dysfunction infected the very heart of government at Stormont. Decision-making was chaotic, politicians unable to set aside political and sectarian divisions, and at critical points, DUP and Sinn Féin ministers failed to put the interest of everyone in Northern Ireland above their party political interests. Just some of the scathing findings contained in the COVID-19 inquiry report. Baroness Heather Hallett highlights how tensions between the DUP and Sinn Féin hampered Northern Ireland's response. The attendance of Sinn Féin's Michelle O'Neill at the funeral of veteran Republican Bobby Storey was singled out. She was Deputy First Minister at the time. The pandemic was at its height. Restrictions were in place. Michelle O'Neill's original failure to apologise for going was found to have damaged public confidence. Today, she insists, lessons will be learnt.
There are many people that lost a loved one who are still dealing with that grief. I think what they would want us to say today is that we will reflect on everything that the inquiry has said, that we will learn lessons, that we will implement changes, that we are able in the future to respond and prepare for any particular crisis that we may face.
The suspension of the joint press conference amid political tension was described as regrettable, and the DUP isn't immune to the criticism. The use of cross-community votes by then First Minister Arlene Foster was branded inappropriate. These controversial comments made on UTV by the DUP's Edwin Poots were also examined.
Why there is a difference between nationalist areas and unionist areas, and the difference is around 6 to 1.
Described as an undisguised attempt to blame one section of society for rising rates because of their political views. In a statement, the DUP welcomed the findings of the report and says its ministers at all times prioritised what we believe to be the best interests of the people of Northern Ireland. But the findings are further fuelling demands for political reform.
It lays bare a system of government which isn't working because the two big parties aren't prioritising the public good over their own narrow party political interest.
We can have good government, but that requires the Secretary of State now to respond to this inquiry, to lead a process of reform of our institutions so that never again can any single party paralyse the decision-making of the executive or the executive itself.
But what we need to do now is learn from that experience and not put people at risk again. So this is a time for reflection, review and improvement.
The report makes 19 recommendations to improve Northern Ireland's readiness for any future pandemic after the deadly but invisible threat of COVID put Northern Ireland's deep divisions on full display. Gareth Wilkinson, UTV Live.
Well, as promised, let's cross live to Stormont now and join our political correspondent Vicky Hawthorne. So Vicky, is there any surprise at what has been said in this latest report about Stormont?
Paul, I think everyone would agree that the COVID pandemic was a truly unprecedented time, that politicians were having to navigate some really difficult decisions. Everyone at that time knew that relationships were frayed, that things were challenging around the executive table. But whenever someone independent like Baroness Hallett, someone from outside of this place, puts it in black and white just how bad things were at the heart of our government, it makes for really, really difficult reading. And perhaps her most damning criticism is around this idea that parties were unable, ministers were unable to set aside their political differences, their political and sectarian differences is what was said, for the greater good, for the common interests of everyone in Northern Ireland. And while I think everyone everyone in Northern Ireland, no one does expect the parties here to get on all the time, for relationships to be rosy. They may well expect that at a time of crisis, at a time when life and death decisions are being made, that the people they elect into office here will put aside those differences for the greater good.
OK, well, we heard some of them in Gareth's report, but how will those responses by the parties so far be viewed?
Well, we've heard from all the parties, as you saw in Gareth's report, all of them on camera except the DUP. They issued a statement. We also had a statement from the Executive Office, from a spokesperson, acknowledging the significant milestone of this report and how lessons are being learned from it. We've heard directly from the First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, again you saw in Gareth's report, but we've had no joined response from ministers here at Stormont to all of this. That statement from the DUP, they insist that their ministers at the time of the pandemic did work in the interests of everyone in Northern Ireland. But the statement that they issued also goes on to take another swipe at Sinn Féin, referring to the fact that, in their view, Sinn Féin undermined the public messaging by going to Bobby Story's funeral in the numbers that they did. And that then begs the question, that remains a running sore between the parties 5 years on. How would things be different here if such a thing were to happen again? And that's exactly now what the Alliance Party and the SDLP are getting at. They are using this, they say it demonstrates again the need for reform here to ensure that things would be different going forward if such a thing were to happen again. And the Alliance Party leader, Naomi Long, has today written to the Secretary of State once again, calling for him to now look at reform seriously. OK, Vicky Hawthorne live at Stormont. There we'll leave it. Thank you very much indeed. And for more political analysis, you can check out our Politics podcast. Yes, UTV Talking Politics sees Vicky and our political editor Tracy McGee look back at the major political stories. You can catch up on ITVX and wherever you get your podcasts.
The funerals have taken place for two of the victims of a crash near Dundalk last weekend. 5 young people died in the horrific collision.
The Irish President was among hundreds of mourners who turned out to pay their respects, as Barbara McCann now reports.
The County Meath village of Drumconrath came to a virtual standstill as people gathered to attend Requiem Mass for 23-year-old Alan McCluskey. The Irish President, Catherine Connolly, was among the mourners who turned out to support Alan's family. So many wanted to pay their respects that the Church of St Peter and St Paul was unable to accommodate them all, and the service was live-streamed to an adjoining hall. Alan tragically lost his life alongside his girlfriend Chloe McGee and 3 other friends in the horror crash in County Louth last weekend. During it, photographs of Alan with Chloe and his family were presented at the altar, alongside his work boots and hard hat and a licence plate with the words Alan and Forever 23. In her eulogy, his sister Sharon said she would look for him in the quiet places.
Born from the finest threads, carefully woven through the love our parents and sisters sewed into you from the moment you came into this world. The same hands that learned to work hard, from his father that carried tools and hopes alike, that embraced his mother and sisters and pet the dogs on quiet mornings, and held many hands to ensure the perfect jive. The space that was once immersed in your presence is now somehow larger in the absence of our entire being.
As the coffin made its way to the local cemetery for burial, dozens of tractors lined the route in a final tribute to the young man who meant so much to so many. Hours later, the funeral for Dylan Cummins, a childhood friend of Alan's, was held in the Church of the Nativity of Our Lady in Ardee in County Louth. Dylan was a mechanic and motorsport fan, and his car was brought to the church as a tribute to him.
For Dad, there will be no one left to shout at in the workshop. For Mum, her golden boy, her world has changed, and nothing can fill that space. I have lost the big brother who made me his personal secretary. Jessica will carry the passion for cars he sparked in her, keeping the Commons name alive in Donegal, just like he would have wanted. Sarah, she'll need a new part-time valeting job because every car Dylan sold, she was the one who cleaned it.
Dylan's coffin was taken from the church to Old St Mary's Cemetery for burial. Many of the mourners at both services today will return tomorrow to attend separate requiem mass for Alan's girlfriend Chloe McGee and Shay Duffy. A service will take place for the 5th victim of the tragedy, Chloe Hipson, in her native Scotland next week. Barbara McCann, UTV Live.
Campaigners have called on the Chancellor to ring-fence funding for childcare in next week's budget. They've been seeking more help for struggling parents due to the ever-rising cost.
Well, our economics correspondent, Jordan Moats, is in the studio. Jordan, talk us through those figures.
Yes, Paul. Well, before we get to that call from campaigners, let's take a look at the cost of childcare. Recent figures show the average cost per child before any help is applied is just over £560 per month per child. But campaigners believe that figure doesn't give a true picture, and this is why. Take a look at this graph. Very few people are using full-time 5 days a week childcare. The bulk are using 1, 2 or 3 days. And the simple reason for that is they can't afford any more. So the average figure would likely rise if more people were using full-time daycare.
A lot of work in families, particularly in key critical services like nurses, doctors, dentists. People that we think are doing relatively well are really struggling under the crushing cost of childcare. And we hear all the time about people making decisions to leave work, but one of the most common decisions is to cut hours. So we're not necessarily seeing a reflection in some of the data that government rely on regarding economic inactivity, but what you're really finding is there is a slow exit from work, and as the costs increase, people withdraw more and more.
So what help is there out there? Well, the government of Westminster runs a tax-free childcare scheme. It gives 20% off bills, and that's capped at £2,000 per child per month. Stormont has recently introduced a child subsidy scheme on top of that, giving a further 15% off those bills, capped at £184 per month. And that's saved parents so far around £8 million. But many parents believe that scheme has already been cancelled out due to price rises. In England, there's also the 30 hours free childcare scheme. The cost of delivering that childcare from Westminster is significant. £1.8 billion was allocated in last year's budget towards that. And the way Northern Ireland's budget works is we get our fair share of that funding, a Barnett consequential. But Stormont can spend that on whatever it wants. It's not limited to childcare, and campaigners want that changed.
We have long received equivalent funds in our Barnett consequential from the UK government for what they spend on childcare. And we estimated in the financial year 23-24 that about 154 million in equivalent funds was sent to Northern Ireland and 25 million was spent. And the reason it doesn't have to be spent on childcare is because it's not ring-fenced. So if we want to resolve the issue of childcare in Northern Ireland, the Chancellor could certainly make a bold move and ring-fence our funds.
Like with all of our stories this week ahead of the budget, the case has now been made. They'll have to wait to see what the Chancellor delivers next week.
Indeed, thanks Jordan. Still to come on this evening's programme. Is the Pope a Tyrone fan? The pontiff goes viral after catching a red hand top in the Vatican.
Plus a portrait of an Enniskillen woman who survived a car fire wins an international prize.
OK, well it's time to check on the headlines making tonight's ITV News at 6:30.
It's Lucrezia Millerini.
Coming up on the ITV Evening News, energy bills head in the wrong direction again as the regulator raises the price cap. Reform UK's former leader in Wales is sentenced to 10 years in prison for taking Russian bribes. And a 5-wicket fight back in Australia will bring you the best moments from a thrilling opening day at the Ashes. Join me for those stories and more at 6:30.
Thanks, Lucrezia. Now, Ireland and the Springboks are on collision course.
Yes, Daniel's in Dublin with the sport.
What a signing! John Mulholland Motors, sponsors of UTV Sport.
Good evening from the Aviva Stadium in Dublin, where tomorrow Ireland take on the reigning world champion South Africa. Andy Farrell's side come into the match off the back of victories against Japan and Australia, and they'll be hoping to end this autumn international series on a high.
Back on home soil for the final time in 2025. A defeat against the All Blacks followed by victories over Japan and Australia. Ireland are hoping to end the year on a high when they take on South Africa tomorrow, It's a tough ask against the reigning world champions.
It's always getting the balance right between focusing on ourselves and getting the best out of ourselves, fixing a few things from last weekend and improving there, but also being fully aware of the threat they're going to bring and having full respect in how we prepare for them. They're pretty comprehensive in how they play the game. Obviously, their DNA is up front, set piece, small, strong scrum, good discipline, winning the momentum and game line battle. But with Tony Brown coming in, they've got the added component now of being able to play wide and deep and very strong on transitions. They obviously kick the ball a lot and can be very dangerous on turnover balls. So, being mentally sharp and focused for the full 80 minutes, not giving them ends around discipline or scraps is going to be important for us.
One of Ireland's most famous nights was a victory over the Springboks in Paris in 2023. It's fair to say they are familiar foes.
There's definitely a rivalry there. There's a strong understanding of how we both want to play the game. We've had some good results. They have beaten us over there as well in 2024. So, there's a lot on the line tomorrow. That's the feeling anyway, and lads are very excited about it. Success of this November hinges a little bit on our performance this weekend. Momentum has obviously built nicely as the weeks has gone on, but this is the real test now, so there's a lot of excitement for it.
Captain Keelan Doris has had his injury problems of late, but he's glad to be back leading the side.
There's responsibilities, but it's a massive privilege to be in this position. During the injury period, you look forward to these big games, coming straight back in to Chicago and being back in the Viva the last couple of weeks as well. It's probably special, and I don't take it for granted at all.
Head coach Andy Farrell jumped to the defence of Sam Prendergast after he received criticism following his defensive performance against Australia.
I think Sam's ability as a fly half far outweighs a work on within his game. I thought he was tremendous last week. His skill set is been fantastic for all to see, and I think everyone needs to look through a little bit of a work on, because everyone's got work-ons and will continue to have work-ons throughout, and that's up to us as coaches and the rest of the players to keep on working on them.
Meanwhile, in Gaelic games, the Ulster Club football semi-finals take place this weekend. Tomorrow, Erne Gaels take on Kilcoo, while on Sunday, Newbridge are aiming to book their place in the Ulster final for the very first time when they take on the Monaghan champions, Scottstown. Well, in football, there's a full round of fixtures in the Irish Premiership this weekend. Tonight, Larne have the opportunity to close the gap on the league leaders Coleraine. They take on Glenavon. Meanwhile, the Bandsiders, they travel to Solitude tomorrow to face Cliftonville. And finally, the Belfast Giants are in action at the SSE Arena tonight. They take on the Guildford Flames. That's all your sport this evening. Have a great weekend.
What a signing! John Mulholland Motors, sponsors of UTV Sport.
A portrait of a woman who survived a car fire in Enniskillen in 1988 has taken the top prize in an internationally acclaimed photo competition.
Yes, the image of Melanie Grimsley was selected from nearly 6,000 entries. Well, Melanie has been speaking to our reporter, Katie Andrews.
This is the portrait that has taken one of the highest honours in contemporary photography. The woman you see, Melanie Grimsley, a burn survivor and campaigner whose story has touched so many. Melanie was just 2 years old when a car fire in 1988 in Enniskillen changed her life. She survived, but her sister, who was nearly 3 years of age, didn't.
I was injured in a car fire. I was in the car with my sister Amanda, and my mum had stopped for milk on the way home, and very quick, in and out, and within a very short space of time our car went on fire. I was pulled out of the car by a man who was passing by, Oliver Quinn, and he tried to reach my sister, but unfortunately he couldn't, and she passed away. So I am so lucky to be here. I have sort of spent my life trying to challenge, the narrative that there are around, scars and visible difference, and, trying to talk to people about beauty ideals and how we accept ourselves and, how we show up in the world. And it feels for me that this portrait is like all of that work, in the one space.
Melanie's story inspired photographer Martina Holberg, who set out to capture her on camera. The picture was up against nearly 6,000 entries from over 2,000 photographers across 51 countries. Judges praised the image for its powerful blend of hope and pain.
I was in contact with an organisation called Changing Faces in UK. And they helped me to come in contact with different people, and Mel was one of them. I want to capture, both vulnerability and the strength, and I think Mel has that.
Beyond the gallery walls, Melanie's message continues to echo, reminding others of the strength and value in what sets them apart.
Whatever it is that makes you different, may not be as obvious as my scars, but whatever it is that makes you different, embrace that, because that is the magic that you have to bring to this world to make it a brighter place.
Katie Andrews, UTV Live.
An incredible story, and Carol Jordan has been talking with Melanie in her Extra Mile podcast. You can find that on ITVX. Now, Pope Leo showed off his sporting prowess in the Vatican earlier this week, catching a Tyrone Gaelic football shirt and gaining legions of Red Hands fans in the process.
Yes, the famous number 14 shirt was thrown by Tyrone man Aidan Gallagher from Catholic TV and radio channel EWTN, who was in Rome for a screening of his documentary, and the clip has gone viral.
I must say the gusto with which he grabbed it and held it high, he would certainly have seemed to possess that pride that most Tyrone people would have when they get their hands on that jersey.
So you think he's got the makings of a Gaelic footballer?
Well, the interesting thing is apparently the talk in Rome here is that he was an American footballer in his youth and also a baseball player. So, and I think that's sort of pretty much well represented in the manner in which he was able to grab the jersey, that was given to him quite ad hocly, I suppose, and raise it high. And you can see the smile or the smirk in his face, because he does seem to present this radiance of hope and joy and a bit more of a sort of a young person's approach to the Christian, the Catholic faith.
Yes, what a catch. The weather's next. Here's Louise.
After a wet start, weather predictions are looking bright. UTV Weather, sponsored by the Grant Vortex Boiler.
Hello there, good evening. It was a cool and crisp start this morning. Overnight lows of -6 degrees Celsius at Catesbridge. It won't be quite as cold tonight. We did have a beautiful sunrise though to start the day. Over the next couple of days, temperatures will return to around average for this time of year. So not feeling quite as cool and chilly as it did this week. We will see rain at times though, becoming quite breezy through Sunday as well. High pressure out to the southwest. We do have various systems pushing in from the west, bringing rain overnight tonight. We do have a change in wind direction, so it won't feel quite as cool as that northerly airfield is blocked off by that high pressure system. Tonight though, rain pushing west to east. Some heavy bursts there, quite blustery and gusty as the rain clears through. It should clear through by around midnight or ever so shortly after. We do have a scattering of showers following behind, but it should stay dry as we head towards dawn. Temperatures throughout the night will drop close to freezing, so we could see a touch of frost in places, but they will recover by dawn. Lows around 5 or 6 degrees to start the day tomorrow. Some bright and sunny spells, a scattering of showers pushing in from the west. It's not a bad day, feeling quite pleasant in any of those brighter breaks, but it will be cool and crisp. Temperatures back up to around average for this time of year. Highs around 8 or 9 degrees Celsius with light winds. Across the rest of Ireland, a cloudy and damp day. A weather system pushing in across the southwest will bring some heavy rain into the afternoon. Winds fresh to moderate along the coast with highs of 9 or 10 degrees Celsius. Sunday potentially looks set to turn wet and windy, quite breezy as the showers push through. Monday looks like a drier day. Temperatures slowly on the rise as we head into the start of next week, back up to around average or ever so slightly above. That's the latest. Bye-bye.
UTV Weather, sponsored by the Grant Vortex Boiler.
Now we have a new newsletter featuring the best of UTV journalism. You can sign up for free by following the links on the screen or scanning the QR code.
Lucrezia is up next. I have the late news later, but have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Good evening.